Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, March 24th, 2025. This is a land use hearing, and we have a public hearing discussion item this evening for the Halligan Water Supply Project. I call this meeting to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. So as I said, we have one hearing item tonight. This is the Halligan Water Supply Project, the 1041 permit, file number 24, zone 3697. So I am Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me are my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally and Commissioner John Kafalis. We also have on the dais to the right, we have from our legal team, Frank Haug and Christine Luckinson. We have Deirdre O'Neill here in the back from our clerk's office. And I'm going to turn things over to Jenny Axmaker to announce the rest of the team and give us a little information about tonight's hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joining me at the dais this evening, we have Leah Schneider from the Health Department. We have our environmental planner, Scott Benton. I am joined by our CERT Planning Administrative staff, Ryan Oswandel and Christina Scretchens. Across the way, we have County Planner Daniel Rymanis, as well as Stephen Rothwell and Tracy Shambo from our Engineering Division. With that, I would respectfully request that all members of the audience silence their electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda and hearing procedures. Instructions are located on the wall just next to the door, or if you're joining us online, you can find those on our website, larimer.org/BOCC/commissioners-meetings. For this evening's hearing, we will be using a sign-up sheet for public comment, and the time limits will be implemented by the chair. If you did not sign up and wish to comment on your way in, you may step outside, or we will ask during the hearing if people have additional public comment. Please wait to speak until you're recognized by the chair. Please maintain civility, refraining from audience applause, comments, or disruptions, whether positive and/or negative. Anyone who is disruptive during the hearing will be asked to leave. Please make all comments to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium. A portable microphone is available as needed. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. Please speak directly into the microphone so that remote participants may hear you. The microphone on the podium can be adjusted and repositioned to best capture your testimony. Any questions that may be asked during public testimony will not be answered until public comment is closed and the rebuttal period has begun. Upon request, assisted listening devices are available for the hearing impaired. For those on Zoom, attendees will be muted until they are recognized by the chair. If an online attendee wishes to speak or request a consent item to be removed, please use the raise your hand function on the Zoom control bar or *9 on your phone. If the Board of County Commissioners has a legal question during the hearing, they may elect to go into an executive session with the county attorney. Executive sessions are private meetings where the board can get confidential legal advice. So rather than asking everyone in attendance to exit the hearing room, the board will relocate to a smaller private room. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. We will begin in just a minute, and I just wanted to make a public statement. Prior to being elected as a county commissioner, I served as a member of the Fort Collins City Council. Expansion of the Halligan Reservoir and other water projects were important policy issues before City Council at that time, and I was transparent with my support for pursuing those projects. However, as a county commissioner, I know my role is different, and I must evaluate this application based on the criteria and facts available to me as part of this hearing. I do not stand to gain anything financially, personally, or officially, regardless of the outcome of this hearing, but because of my prior role with the city, I wanted to be clear at the outset that I have no predetermined positions and will be fair and impartial in this hearing. All right, so we will begin with a staff presentation, I assume. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
And that will be me. Give me just a second.
Wonderful, thank you.
Can we get it off the top? All right, so good evening, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Jenny Axmaker. I'm the planning manager. And before we dive into the specifics on the Halligan case, I just want to do a brief overview about 1041 regulations. So what are 1041 regulations? They give local governments the authority to regulate matters of statewide concern. This includes the development of regional transportation and utility infrastructure. It can also be used to protect specific geographic areas with historic, cultural, or natural resources of statewide importance. It includes a variety of regulated activities, including new and converted power plants, reservoirs, pipelines, etc. Here's a list of the 1041 process. I want to note this evening we are at the Board of County Commissioners hearing, and it is expected that the Board of County Commissioners will make a decision in this hearing. And previously this was brought before the Planning Commission for a public hearing to make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. Another important thing to note about the 1041 process is it's governed by state statutes, and that includes the amount of time that we have to review these projects. They must get scheduled once determined to be complete to a hearing within 60 days, and we only have 60 days to review whether the application is complete. Purpose of tonight's meeting is to have a public hearing on the application with an opportunity for public input and a decision by the Board of County Commissioners. So with that, let's talk about the Halligan Water Supply Project. This is a 1041 review of a permit application for an activity of state interest under Article 10 of the Land Use Code for the expansion of the Halligan Reservoir. This includes constructing a new dam, partial demolition of the old dam, reconstruction of the North Poudre Canal diversion, construction of a fish passage at the Fort Collins intake diversion structure at Gateway Park, and some supporting infrastructure improvements. So here's a map. It may be a little bit hard to read, but Halligan Reservoir is located in this area. It's about 25 miles northwest of Fort Collins. The proposed work includes activities around the existing dam, the North Poudre Canal diversion located approximately 3.5 miles southeast of the dam, and the Gateway Natural Area along the main stem of the Cache-la-Poudre River. Temporary construction areas include access roads to the dam, with the west side access from Highway 287 and the east side access from Cherokee Park Road or County Road 80. Here's another map showing zoomed out a little bit more of a context to where the Halligan Reservoir is in comparison to the Gateway Natural Area, Livermore, and Fort Collins. The applicant is the city of Fort Collins. The total development area they're looking to increase from 253 acres of surface area of the reservoir up to 391 acres of reservoir surface area. Surrounding land use is primarily agricultural and rural residential, and the existing zoning is open. As I mentioned previously, the dam is accessed from the west side by Highway 287 and the east side from Cherokee Park Road, County Road 80C. The Gateway Natural Area is accessed from Poudre Canyon Road, Colorado Highway 14, and the North Poudre Canal diversion is accessed from Cherokee Park Road as well. The City of Fort Collins, acting through the Fort Collins Utility, is pursuing the Halligan Water Supply Project, a municipal water supply project. It involves primarily enlarging the existing Halligan Reservoir on the North Fork of the Cache-la-Poudre River. The existing reservoir currently supplies water to shareholders of the North Poudre Irrigation Company, or NPIC, which would continue to use and operate the historical reservoir pool of 6,400 acre-feet. Fort Collins would store its water in the enlarged portion of the reservoir. Fort Collins water would primarily come from water rights historically used to educate now developed lands in the Fort Collins area that have been transferred to municipal use. Here is a vicinity map showing the reservoir. You can see the access road from 287 on the west, or the east, my apologies. Additional access roads proposed to be constructed. Here's a photo of the existing dam from the west, looking northwest. Oops. And here's a model rendering of the replacement dam. And it's important to note the spillway, the nearby access roads, including the access road that crosses in front of the dam. And I think that's all I wanted to point out. Yeah. Okay. The proposed construction timeline. So I believe this has been updated and the applicant will provide further detail, but design to 60% completion is approximately 2024. The next activities that would occur should this 1041 permit be approved would be working on the west access road as well as a test quarry that would be constructed. After that, in continuing through 2025 and 2026 would be permitting with final design completion in 2025 and construction beginning in 2026. Fort Collins anticipates developing the following infrastructure associated with this project: replacement of the dam, including the outworks, stilling basin, and other appurtenant structures constructed approximately 200 feet downstream of the existing dam. Removal of the existing overhead power lines serving the dam, and it's anticipated that that will be replaced locally by solar, micro hydropower, and diesel generators. There'll be partial demolition of the existing dam after the replacement is complete, and construction of an HOX system to use liquid oxygen to provide dissolved oxygen to the reservoir, improving water quality. Construction of a river crossing below the existing dam. Then construction of the North Poudre Canal diversion with the potential for a fish passage. And then there's temporary construction areas and features, including road widening for construction vehicles, construction staging areas, concrete batch plant, and a possible quarry for concrete aggregates. Permanent remnants of the construction will include disposal stockpiles, new access roads within the immediate area of the replacement dam, or widening roads in limited areas where roads cannot be reclaimed on the portions of Fort Collins property or where private property owners request to retain widened roads. And the addition is of a construction of a fish passage around the Fort Collins intake diversion structure at Gateway Park. There are some noteworthy impacts associated with this project that I wanted to call to the Board of County Commissioners' attention and discuss those mitigations efforts that are proposed. So impacts to roadways will be a noteworthy impact. This includes traffic, wear and tear, and dust. These are proposed to be mitigated through roadway improvements, traffic controls, maintenance, and the proposed conditions as part of the staff recommendation. There will be a test quarry which will have impacts, and potentially a permanent quarry which will have similar impacts, as well as construction impacts. These include primarily noise and dust. They will be mitigated through best practices, restrictions, and proposed conditions. There will be a reduction in on-site wetlands and wildlife habitats. The applicant is proposing off-site mitigation through the purchase of wetland mitigation credits and habitat preservation, and this is in excess of what would normally be the requirement. They're also proposing collaring and monitoring of bighorn sheep and improved rangeland habitat. Impacts to streams and water quality will be there. There will be an enhancement of intermittent flows in the main channel of the North Fork. There will be the creation of fish passages and oxygenation temperature buffer pools for dam releases. We notified surrounding property owners of this, everyone within 500 feet. I will point out that Fort Collins has previously conducted extensive outreach, including their EIS process. And we provided notice not only through the land use code recommended locations and mechanisms, but we also utilized the public input website, which is a new tool for the county as part of this process. As of noon today, we've received a total of 9 comments from members of the public, and 8 of those were in support of the project and 1 was not. As far as referral agencies go, we sent this to 33 different agencies and got responses from 17. We sent them to county agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, as well as the city of Fort Collins. So what did we hear from our referral agencies? No major objections were raised. There were numerous requests for additional documentation, mitigation, and permitting before final approval, but the project appears feasible and compliance with these state and federal regulations before construction can proceed. We have 22 review criteria for all 1041 permits. I'm not going to go through all 22 approval criteria. However, if we wish to speak more about any of them as we move forward in the project, I certainly can bring them up and we certainly can discuss them. But they fall into 10 major themes: resources of state and national significance, neighborhoods and property, environmental resources, public safety, county planning and intergovernmental agreements, development standards, adequate public facilities and services, environmental health and hazards, responses to referral agencies, and the technical and financial feasibility of the project and mitigation. Staff has found, based on a review of the submitted documentation, Article 4 development standards, Article 10.9.1 criteria for 1041 permits, and Article 10.10.4 additional review criteria for water and sewer projects, that the proposed Halligan water supply project satisfies all applicable criteria as discussed in detail in the staff report, subject to the implementation of the conditions of approval as recommended by staff. Why do we include conditions of approval? As I mentioned at the beginning, the 1041 permit application process is regulated by the state and includes very tight turnarounds for bringing projects to a review body for a decision. It is difficult to address any potential shortcomings in a project in that time period, so we get to addressing those gaps between the project and the approval criteria through conditions of approval. We also use them to guide the technical review process and to clarify how the project is implemented and operated. We are proposing 52 conditions of approval. I will admit conditions 14 and 15 are identical and duplicative, so we would propose that we only implement one of those. But in general, we're recommending conditions of approval to address general conditions, health conditions, including technical review, operations, air admissions, demolition, noise, facilities, and recreation. We're proposing engineering conditions to address final design, as well as schedule and inspections, construction of county roadways, post-construction requirements, and then we have a handful of conditions proposed to regulate wildlife and vegetation, as well as cultural and historic resources. I'd be happy to bring up the entire list of conditions should we need so, but we do have a proposed motion that the Board of County Commissioners approve the application for the 1041 permit, subject to the conditions of approval recommended by staff, with the removal of the duplicate condition 15 for a total of 52 conditions. With that, staff would be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Fallis.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. Thanks, Jenny. I have a variety of questions, but I think they're best suited for the applicant and certainly after they do their presentation. But I did want to ask one question. I believe it's appropriate at this time regarding one of the conditions of approval. And I believe that is under air emissions during construction, 19, condition of approval 19A. It says no off-site transport, of visible emissions from dirt access and haul roads, etc. What does that mean?
I'm going to defer to Leah Schneider from the Health Department, who is the author of this condition.
I presume that you would. Thank you.
Hello, Leah Schneider with the Health Department. Off-site transport, it just means that like visible dust, it can't leave the property that the work is being conducted on. So you don't want like plumes of dust leaving the construction site for the dam. Does that help? Dust has to be contained on site, the visible dust.
And of course, there'll be various fugitive dust mitigation processes, water trucks and so forth, and that would help with the transport of visible emissions off-site.
Yes, correct. All the access roads will be watered, and then like the batch plant and the quarry that will be going on possibly at the dam, those will have very specific controls as well. So yeah, every point source will have specific controls based on what's the activity that's occurring.
Okay. Thank you, Leah. I believe that clarifies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Let me build off of the Commissioner's previous comment. You said it for all different kinds of areas. Does that also include kind of the, not thinking of the right word, the targeted implosions or in the quarry when there's, because I see another action of another dam being built and I see dust from that. I'm just curious, does that include those explosions and impacts? And how is that captured?
Yes, if they do use, say, dynamite, I don't think that was proposed though. I think they're doing general excavation. But yeah, if they do dynamite explosions, there's certain controls that the state implements for dust control on those. And again, it has to be contained within the site. So if you saw plumes of dust at, say, one of our other dam projects, but it was within their property area, as long as it was below 20% opacity, it's allowed.
Okay, that's helpful. And one other quick question, and maybe Scott can answer this or Jenny. Is this project, since we just did some new lighting standards, does the night sky lighting standards apply to this project, or was this because do they coincide, or is there?
So they submitted this application prior to us adopting those new standards. However, when they come in for a technical review, that would be a new application and we could evaluate it against the current standards.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
I'll save my questions for the applicant. So we're all good with staff questions? All right. So I would ask the applicant to come up to make a presentation. We would normally allow 10 minutes. My understanding is that you would like 15 minutes for the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. And so you'll figure out how to split that are you the only presenter or are you?
No, there's two.
There'd be two. Okay. So staff will keep track of the time on that. And then we'll just ask you to proceed. You may have slides so we won't get started till you get started.
Madam Chair, it's my understanding that the applicant wishes to share their own slides. If you can just join the Zoom meeting and share your slides, we could do that, or I'm happy to jump in and share them for you.
Do you mind sharing?
I will do it. Give me just 1 minute to pull them up then.
So then, just so folks understand how the process goes, the applicant will get the 15 minutes. After that, we'll ask any questions for clarification. We'll then open it to public comment. We'll take public comment, and then you would have the 5 minutes after public comment to do any rebuttal. And then, then we may ask more questions after that. So.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. All right. Good evening, and thank you, County Commissioners, for considering the City of Fort Collins 1041 application for the Halligan Water Supply Project. I am Nicole Ponsolette Johnson. I'm the One Water Executive Director for the City of Fort Collins. Out of transparency, I serve on the Larimer County Environmental Science Advisory Board, but I am here today in my official role as the One Water Executive Director. As an ESAB member, I have not discussed the Halligan project with the county staff or the commissioners. Other Fort Collins team members with me here tonight include Darren Parkin, the Halligan Program Manager, Eric Potiondi, our legal counsel, Honora Thompson, Senior Specialist of Communications, Stephanie Krecka, Senior Specialist of Public Engagement, Donnie Dustin, Senior Water Engineer, and Keith Meyer, President of Detesco and Project Advisor. Next slide. Thank you. This slide just provides a brief overview of the City of Fort Collins water supply infrastructure. Our portfolio consists of trans-basin water, including the Colorado Big Thompson and North Platte, and native water rights from the Poudre and North Poudre, going back to the early 1900s. And key to storing these water rights early in the year after when we have runoff from snowpack and storing it for year-round availability are the reservoirs, such as Horsetooth, Joe Wright, and Halligan. This water supply portfolio supports the vibrant community of Fort Collins and a lot of northern Colorado. Approximately 140,000 residents, several commercial partners in brewing, technology, and healthcare industries, multiple academic institutions, agricultural partners, and other surrounding water utilities. Next slide, please. Thank you. The city is uniquely positioned to replace the aging dam at Halligan Reservoir, over 100 years old, and add 8,200 acre-feet of storage water rights that we currently own. thus increasing the reliability and resiliency of the Fort Collins water supply for decades to come. Next slide, please. In addition to improving reliability, the Halligan Water Supply Project is the most cost-effective approach for improving the city's water storage, using an existing reservoir while also providing multiple environmental benefits, as our program manager, Darren Parkin, will speak to.
Good evening to the board and commissioners. As introduced, I'm Darren Parkin, program manager, and I'll take us through the rest of our brief presentation here this evening. This first slide, the next slide, please. The first one that I'm going to speak to speaks to the long-range vision that the utility has had and the commitment to the Halligan project. This has really been in the works since the 1980s, when talks were initiated between Fort Collins and North Poudre Irrigation Company. We entered into an agreement with them to purchase the existing reservoir and dam and surrounding land from them. We've been making annual payments ever since. We're getting close to the end of those, but it is important to remember, as you heard in the staff report, that we do not have any water rights in there currently. The 6,400 acre feet that has been impounded since 1909 belongs in its entirety to the North Poudre Irrigation Company. We will be adding an additional 8,200 acre feet on top of that. Next slide, please. So this is an overall view of the existing dam, which is in your upper left corner. It is about 77 feet tall. It has a murky history. 1909, I think, is the accepted number when it was completed. Might have been 1910. It's a very fascinating history of groups getting together to build an irrigation reservoir for irrigated agriculture in northern Larimer County, but they would go broke, or people would steal the funds, and eventually they got it built to its current size. But it was always intended to be a much larger reservoir and a much taller dam, but that's just all they could put in place at the time. So the original proposal, for those of you that have been tracking this project for a long time, was to raise that existing structure. However, since it was built so long ago with no real engineering plans or design and piecemeal, it just didn't have the structural integrity in this day and age to be able to use that existing dam and raise it. So that led to our modified proposed action, which is a pivot to building a brand new roller compacted concrete dam 200 feet directly downstream from the existing one on the North Fork of the Poudre River. The new dam is going to be quite a bit larger and quite a bit taller, almost twice as tall, 144 and a half feet tall, a little less than half. And the primary reason for that size, though, is to meet the current day flood requirements that the spillway needs to pass over. So in order to meet that 1 in 10 million year flood event, which I think we all hope we're not here for if that ever does happen, we need to have a very large spillway and a very large dam. But the actual vertical rise of the water level in the new normal pool of the reservoir will only be 25 feet. So if you see on the picture on the right there that we've already heard, we will only be inundating an additional 138 acres of land. It is a very steep valley that the reservoir sits in with steep walls. Most of that inundation would be on the west end. So we're able to more than double the size of the reservoir with a fairly minimal impact to inundating new lands. Next slide, please. So this is our project timeline. You've heard a little bit about this already. We started our federal NEPA permitting process almost on our 20-year anniversary of that. It kicked off in 2006. So we've been in this for quite a while. You'll see a big time gap from 06 to 19 here in this slide. That does not mean nothing was happening. It's just working through the process. We had some partners. They came and went. The scope shifted a little bit, but ultimately we stayed the course and stayed true to the project. We really had a development in 2019 where we got the draft environmental impact statement was issued for the project, along with the associated public comment period. Then in 2023, we were issued the final environmental impact statement from the Army Corps of Engineers, which was a huge milestone. Also in 2023, which was a good year for the Halligan project, we were got the approval from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission of our Fish and Wildlife Mitigation Enhancement Plan, which is now the official position of the state of Colorado in support of our project and the governor's office. And it really outlines the operational and commitments that we've made and the environmental mitigations and enhancements that are associated with this project. So, as we're here this evening, we're all aware we're in the 1041 process with the county. And we also concurrently are reviewing 60% engineering design. We have a draft design that has been submitted in-house from our design engineer, AECOM. That is going to kick off a whole bunch of activity around that design this year. We will have a technical advisory committee come in, which is nationwide experts from all over dam design and construction that will look at our plans. We will do a primary failure mode analysis. The state comes back into the project, the Safety of Dams program, the state engineer's office. We have our spillway being modeled, an actual physical model and outlet works model at the CSU Hydraulics Laboratory. So all those activities are taking place on the design side right now to inform final 60% design by the end of this year, into actual final design early next year. On the permitting side, the final piece that we really need to get in on the federal side for our NEPA process is the submittal of our 401 water quality certification application. That is being drafted and is almost finished. We really hope to have that in for review by next month, if at all possible. We've had very productive meetings with CDPHE and with CPW. We have offered our mitigations. We feel that our project is fully mitigated under the 401 water quality program. We do not have any water quality impacts that we cannot address. We will actually address all water quality issues in the reservoir itself and have fully mitigated releases through the reservoirs, through that 401. And on the temperature side, we are claiming a temperature net benefit from Halligan Reservoir to Milton Seaman Reservoir. I think it's roughly 24 miles directly downstream. So the 401 modeling has come together very well, and those talks with CDPHE have come together very well. That application will go in 6 to 12 months from now. That will be complete, and then that will go into getting our record of decision for the Army Corps of Engineers, and that will complete our federal NEPA process. We're really hoping to get that record of decision, the ROD, second quarter 2026, and then we will move into construction of the dam itself, late 26 or early 2027. And be operational in 2029, 2030. So it's quite, a lengthy permitting process. It's really coalescing into a real viable project, and we can see it coming together. So the next slide. So I'm going to finish this out here. I've got 3 slides that focus entirely on the environmental side of the project, impacts, mitigations, and benefits. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of words on this one, but it's a partial look at the benefits that we are claiming for this project. So we do have a species of concern. That's the Preble's meadow jumping mouse. That has been fully mitigated off-site on the Roberts Ranch conservation property. There has been 295 acres of critical habitat that has been developed. It's been maintained and monitored. That plan, it's in place now. That plan has been approved by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. There is some critical habitat for Preble's mouse that goes up to the base of the existing Halligan Dam. In all of our field surveys to date, I'm not aware of any actually being found on site. We found some in the general location, but not in that exact location. So we are well mitigated on the Preble's meadow jumping mouse side. Other wildlife, we have migratory bird raptor studies. Those have taken place. We'll have more of those before we start to construct. In our fish and wildlife plan, it is determined that impacts to avian species are negligible or non-detectable. So we are feeling good about that. On the terrestrial side, our number one focus through our partnership with CPW is bighorn sheep. We have partnered with them to collar the small bighorn sheep herd that exists and monitor that herd that exists in the area. We've also done some cheatgrass range improvement monitoring to give them, improved habitat, during construction, and also some water guzzler watering sources for that bighorn sheep herd. And there's others. There's the Townsend big-eared bat and other terrestrial species, but we're feeling, really good about the minimal impacts there. Wetlands are all off-site. We have bought the entirety of a brand new wetlands mitigation bank that's being constructed, I would say roughly 12 miles or so below the dam itself in the Livermore Valley, a short distance below the Phantom Canyon itself, if you're familiar with the area. So that was at the direction of the United States Corps of Engineers, where they said, we want you to buy into an accredited bank, buy those credits, they permit it, they monitor it, and it is up to the developers and the operators of that bank to ensure that those wetlands are developed and held in, quality wetlands mitigation. All told, we're only looking at about 11.5 acres of total wetlands impact on this project. We are going to inundate some, but we will be establishing new wetlands along the shoreline, and we're looking at roughly around 17 acres of mitigation on our proposed wetlands plan, which has been submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers. And then we'll get into the North Fork flow regime, but let's move on to that next slide, and we'll talk about that in depth here in our last final 3 minutes. So this one is a multiple one. You'll have to hit it a couple times. It'll do some things, but what we're going to show here is that currently the flow regime below Halligan Reservoir, like right now, there's 10 miles of dry river bed below the river, below Halligan, because the North Dakota Irrigation Company operates the facility for water supply. They don't operate it for environmental reasons. And then in the summertime, there are times when they sweep the river. They have a diversion structure roughly 10 miles below the reservoir that they take all the water out of the North Fork and into a tunnel and into the North Poudre Canal. And then that'll dry up another additional 2 miles. So we're looking at 12 miles of river that have been dried up on an annual basis since 1909. And when we come online, that will no longer happen. That will be re-wetted year-round and be fully mitigated. And we're actually claiming a net benefit of 22 miles of the North Fork between Halligan Reservoir all the way down to Milton Seaman Reservoir. That's really the crown jewel of our mitigation plan, and in the package that we feel is really represents the commitment to the project and the environment in the area and the Livermore Valley that the utility holds. So we'll go to the final slide. And this is kind of a jarring visual representation of the bone-dry stream bed of the North Fork of the Poudre River. I believe that this picture is taken right at the mouth of the Phantom Canyon. I was there with the landowners a couple weeks ago. And as a side note, we just learned that a Preble's Meadow Jumping Mouse bank, conservation bank, is going to be built right in this exact location. And one of the reasons they're able to do that is our anticipated mitigation releases for the Halligan project. So we're seeing, improvements all along the river system when we come online, and that'll be from a 3 cubic feet per second winter release from October to April, and then we're guaranteeing 5 cubic feet per second in the summer months from Halligan Reservoir all the way down to Milton Seaman Reservoir. And then there is a whole additional suite of operational considerations that we have. We will be bypassing the 3 days of the annual runoff peak every year, so you have more of that natural hydrograph, that natural flushing flows down through the system. We will have ramping rates to ramp our releases up and down for the benefit of aquatic habitat and fish and to avoid thermal shock. We have a sedimentation program, a sediment management program, because there is a sediment TMDL in the North Fork, but at the same time, it's a very sediment-starved reach due to the way it's been operated for so long. So we will be introducing the right kinds of sediment, the right kinds of flushing flows in at the right times. We currently do, the pebble counts, and we look at the trout spawning beds and the macro studies, and they don't come back very good. And so we have what we feel is a pretty poor baseline, and we will build on that with our protectable releases to help, from the aquatics up to the terrestrials and on up the line to improve riparian habitat all along, this river stretch. So with that, I'm out of time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the staff that presented, Nicole or Darren or anyone? With regard, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, you may want to stay up, Darren. I don't.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Darren, I think I'll start with you. Can you go back to I wanted to get a little more information about the collared bighorn sheep herd.
Uh-huh.
So the water guzzlers, and then I've heard the water guzzlers, and then dealing with the cheatgrass. And is there going to be some active planting of more native, highly nutrient-dense, normal vegetation for them, or is it just dealing with the cheatgrass and maybe the natural species will come back? That's their more natural meals.
Commissioner, in the Fish and Wildlife Plan, to my knowledge, there's no reference to revegetating or replanting native species. Of course, we do have a seed mix that's been approved that matches the veg studies that have been done. So all of our reclaim will do that exact thing, noxious weed control and everything. But for the bighorn sheep specifically, it's more just to get the cheatgrass in particular, the noxious weeds out, and improve that rangeland habitat. This is a highly stressed herd. I believe there's not very many animals, around 15 or so. I don't know the exact number. And it's the goal is to not stress them any further and not drive them out of this area. And so the monitoring, improving their overall conditions, and keeping a real close eye on them, pre, during, and post construction. And we have a whole bunch of additional commitments to CPW, up to and including potentially funding a staff member to help, monitor the herd and do various things. It's really we have construction limitations. So we have the ancillary projects. The biggest one would be the construction or reconstruction of the North Pooter Canal diversion that's owned by EPIC, which we talked about, that sweeps the river and puts all the water in the tunnel. When we do that, we can only build, obviously, for water supply reasons in the wintertime, but we also have a very narrow window that we can reconstruct that to avoid disturbance of the bighorn sheep herd. So, we've agreed to, a lot of things. They're really kind of the star of the terrestrial show, so to speak, to really make sure that we're not impacting negatively that herd.
Great. I appreciate that. One other question I have, if I might, Madam Chair. Just because I know people are listening, and so increasing them, so it's the North Pooter Irrigation Ditch Company has this amount, and then you're adding this amount on top, and increasing the surface area. So where is that water heading now, or where is that water stored or going now?
North Pooter's water is all diverted, through their tunnel and used at their various users, agricultural users, and also the town of Wellington. Our water, we have none in the system. So our water is used elsewhere. We have others that can speak to that, if you want a more in-depth answer. But none of it's being utilized on the North Fork for City of Fort Collins at this time. It's being used elsewhere in the system. And what we really need is a bucket. We have very little carryover storage. And what we're looking for is to be able to carry over 20% of our annual demand, and we're nowhere close to that. We have the least amount of storage of any community on the Front Range. And so, this project is really for resiliency, and, potential drying climate, and to build out. We're pretty close to building out our water supply infrastructure, but we do have some increase in population coming, and really, but this is to secure who is here now and what we've got now, and allow us to go through a 1 in 50-year drought with no impacts to our customers. Right now, we can't do that. We have the water rights. We've held those water rights, I believe, since the 80s and the 90s. They're called the Southside water rights, but we just don't have the bucket, so to speak. Very simple terms to store those water rights. So they have to go, they're used elsewhere, leased out, rented out. If you would like a more in-depth water rights answer, I can get somebody else up here that can speak to that.
Sure, if you don't mind. Just
All right.
curious, because I'm just trying to trace where the water is now and where it's going. So I know it's a complex question. So
Sure. So Donnie Dustin, I'm a water resources engineer at the city. So really most of what will be stored in the enlargement are, like Darren mentioned, Southside ditch rights. Those are rights that historically served ag around Fort Collins. There's some of the ditches that run on the south side of the river. That's where the name comes from. So if I'm remembering correctly, about 90% of what we store in Halligan are those rights. We have taken them through water court so that they originally went into those ditches. Now we've grown over that area and we'll be able to take those at Halligan instead. So historically, that's water that passed by the reservoir to serve those farms, 40, 50 years ago. Now we'll be able to store it in Halligan. We do have some junior conditional rights, but that's a very small part of what we would store in the reservoir.
okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Darren. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions right now? Okay. Commissioner Kafalis, questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues. I think my start-off question was answered. There was a reference to currently the 6,900 acres that are in Halligan Reservoir have been, that's been part of the water supply portfolio of the city of Fort Collins. But my understanding is that since the current dam was built 114 years ago, 75 feet tall. It's interesting, a little bit of history that you provided there, Darren. Thank you. That all of that water's gone for agricultural purposes. It hasn't gone for municipal uses. Is that correct, or could you please clarify that, sir?
Yeah, Commissioner Kafala said is absolutely correct. It's 6,400 acre feet that is stored in there, and none of that is municipal water, has been used for municipal uses, except for the portion that North Poudre Irrigation Company supplies to the town of Wellington, and maybe some other municipal uses. But it's all water rights held by MPIC, not by the city of Fort Collins, for their uses.
And by the proposed dam 200 feet downstream, which would be twice as high as the current dam, that would increase the capacity of Halligan Reservoir by, I believe, 8,200 acre feet. And so that is the water that will be available to address the purpose and need of this project, which is emergency water supply, drought security, and addressing the impacts of climate change. Is that right, Darren?
Yes, Commissioner, that's exactly right.
And how exactly will that work? So if this is approved, the construction would begin in 2026. It would be completed by 2029, perhaps, or you can clarify or correct me. And then once that additional water fills up the larger reservoir, then what happens? I mean, do you release the water when it's determined that we have drought conditions? How does that work, sir?
Yeah, so
Thanks.
the thought is that it'll initially remain pretty full until the demand of the system would necessitate it. It's kind of the rainy day account, so to speak, for when it doesn't rain. It's really a resiliency project. Physically, we will release our protectable releases that we will protect in water court so they can't be diverted by others to meet our mitigation requirements. Those releases will go down through the North Fork to the main stem of the Poudre River, where they will be exchanged up to the municipal pipeline intake at Gateway.
May I just ask a couple more, and then if you have questions, but I just want to make sure I understand everything, and I appreciate. So the way it will work is the additional water will be run down the North Fork. It'll get to the confluence of the main stem of the Poudre River, and then about a half mile up is a diversion. There's an intake. How does the water get upstream and into that intake, and then it can be used for municipal purposes when needed?
Yeah, good question, Commissioner. So, yes, the North Fork is our means of conveyance. It's all gravity driven. There's no pumps, zero emissions, but there is no physical connection between the Halligan North Fork water and the main stem water that we would divert. So there's an exchange, and so we will be introducing water into the main stem, and then we will be exchanging for main stem water a like amount up above. And there are restrictions on that. We won't do that exchange the 3 hottest months of the year, July, August, and September. We want to be cognizant of temperature in the exchange reach. We are watching anchor ice conditions in the exchange reach in the wintertime. And in the really, really bad drought years, we have an operational plan to supplement with some additional water from the main stem through that exchange reach. But yeah, there's no physical connection. It's an exchange.
May I ask one more question for now? And I hope there's some opportunity. No, I appreciate everything. I just want to make sure we do our due diligence here. So nowhere, and I will admit I didn't read all 11,388 pages entirely, but I did my best to figure out where things were and read the most relevant information that I could. But I don't, maybe it's in the EIS, but I don't see anything about the cost. How much will it cost to build this, and how will that affect ratepayers? I understand that the city has an enterprise fund. Could you explain a little bit about the cost and why you feel that's more cost effective than perhaps the what is it, the no action alternative that was presented to the Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, so the cost has went up over time. You know, Commissioner, we've been in the permitting process for an awful long time, and so we've had a series of jumps, a series of jumps, and a series of jumps. The number that was rolled out a few years ago that we're sticking with, overall project cost is $308 million, of which $50 million we've already spent is encumbered. We are refining that budget. We hope to bring that top line number down, but we're not willing, to put that out there quite yet. We do think we're going to be able to bring some cost savings into this project. And you make a very good point, with water equity. What good's a water project, municipal project, if nobody can afford it? And so we are trying to minimize impacts on our ratepayers as much as possible. But there will be some increases in rates, and what those are still to be determined. But we're going to have to borrow some money. There's some state programs. We're going to bond for this through a state bonding program, municipal bonds. There's going to be a whole funding package that's coming together, and we're far enough into the project now where we can start to put those pieces in place and really firm up what we're looking at and what that's going to cost. We are absolutely able to come in and go line for line through that budget and get cost savings in there where we can, while maintaining a safe and reliable project that'll be in place. It's really a legacy project that'll be in place for 150 plus years for future folks in the Fort Collins utility. These types of projects really aren't for anybody in this room necessarily. It's for the next generations, which is what makes them so exciting. But hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, yes, I appreciate that. And may I ask one or two more? Otherwise, I can defer to you folks. Thank you, Madam Chair, being most gracious. I know that there are a number of conditions of approval that are addressing the impacts on the county infrastructure. County Road 80C is not exactly the prime road, and there's going to be some heavy truck traffic. And I know there's all these mitigation efforts, and there's a commitment on the part of the city to make sure that things are repaired or maintained. This is going to happen for 2.5 years if this is approved. That's a lot of impact. That road is not great to begin with. We do regular, twice a year, whatever, maintenance, regrading and all of that. How will that actually work in the real world? And in terms of traffic safety. And if I may, just one thing to add to that is, it dawned on me that should this be approved, the construction time frame overlaps with a couple of other projects that might have impacts on Highway 287. So I believe NISP is going forward, the Glade Reservoir project, and that will bring truck traffic onto Highway 287. There'll be the realignment of 287. CDOT has various Highway 287 safety improvement projects. I'm sure you folks are aware of all that. So how does all this work together, and in particular, the dirt roads that are up there, 80C and as the western access, I think it is, and then the other one off of 287. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Commissioner Cafalas, I'll talk to ADC first, Cherokee Park Road. We will be utilizing that road very little, and that is really by design and on purpose. We realize that is a heavily used county road. There would be a lot of landowner concerns should we use that as a haul road or construction access. So the west access, we have an agreement or finalizing an agreement with the Land Association of Phantom Canyon Ranches, and that will give us access through to lightly improve the west access through their conservation lands and through their cabin properties on that private portion, and also to develop our test quarry for laboratory analysis and do a few other small projects, which we hope to take place as soon as this calendar year. And then that'll be it. It's going to be a very small window of use and impact on ADC and on the West Access Road. It is our hope that it is going to become just in a secondary / emergency access. We have no plans. Our main construction access is all from the East Access Road off of Highway 287. So very, very light usage of Cherokee Park Road, County Road 80C, and the associated Meadow Creek Road access through the Land Association. We have commitments. We'll have conditions with the county on the 1041 for 80C. We have commitments with the Land Association. We will maintain that road during construction and in perpetuity post-construction. So that's the west access. 287, you are correct. We will potentially have projects that are on top of one another. So impacts to the highway 287 could be more extensive. CDOT is certainly aware. We've had those conversations with them. For our project, there's a climbing lane as you head north on Highway 287 right at that east access turn. That will be restriped when we need to use it, and the speed limit is going to be dropped down to 45 miles an hour, a long ways down to the bottom of that hill, and to put all traffic over into the one lane, slow it down significantly, and get access in and out. If we're able to develop an on-site aggregate source, we're looking at a maximum vehicle per day of around 70. We have a number of 200 a day identified in the EIS, but that would be worst case scenario if we have to do offsite aggregate and other things. But we're really hoping to keep that down. The east access road will be improved accordingly and will be maintained accordingly. And so, yeah, that could be multiple water applications every day. We will, have equipment on site. It will be maintained on a continual basis. We will only use water on this project. There will be no chemicals, no mag chloride or anything like that for dust control or road maintenance. And then post-construction with our landowner agreements, then we will maintain those roads too. So the Fort Collins has maintained that commitment in, perpetuity.
Just final quick follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chair. Then I can certainly be quiet for a bit. What if you do your test quarry and you determine it's not an adequate supply of aggregate? Where are you going to get the aggregate from? Which direction is it going to come from?
Commissioner, we are really hopeful right now. Our drilling and our seismic work shows that it's going to be a good source, but you never know till you open it up. There are examples of other projects that have run into that. We are currently doing laboratory analysis of the Granite Canyon source up in Wyoming, and also the peatline limestone source, which is close. So I would imagine the aggregate would come from one of those two. I know if it should come from up north in Wyoming, there is a real concern with using Red Mountain Road as a conveyance. And so we will not do that. All trucks would stay on the highways, state highways, and they won't be allowed to cut down through that dirt road and impact those homeowners and the county road maintenance and structures on that road. That is the commitment we've already made.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Darren.
Welcome. I just have a couple questions. So at what point you talked about maybe rebuilding the dam, and then you decided that you really needed a new dam. Can you tell me the sort of timeline for that? Was that a while ago that happened?
Commissioner, it was not that long ago. It predates me. I've only been on the project a couple of years, but there was a structural analysis done of that existing structure. They actually went down on ropes and rappelled, and they took cores, and then they did a real structural analysis of it. But the modified proposed action was, I believe, 2020 or 2021 is when we made the pivot to a new dam.
Did that require any kind of new NEPA or any contact with the Army Corps after that was decided?
Oh, yes.
Quite a bit.
And so when I throw out the term modified proposed action, that's coming out right straight out of the NEPA process with the Army Corps. So we had a proposed action, which was raising the existing structure. I'm sorry, I'm kind of blending that in. And then we modified that to build a new one. And really, when the cost benefit analysis was done, it got down to the point where it was the same amount of money to just build a brand new structure, brand new outlet works, new everything. Instead of trying to raise that old structure. So it just made a lot more sense.
With the sort of deconstruction of the old dam, are there possibilities for recycling? It seemed like there might be, but it seemed like you might be unsure at this point if there were possibilities to recycle any of the materials or the concrete or?
Well, unfortunately, the timing of that decommissioning of the old dam doesn't work, or we would absolutely recycle it. It would go right into the new dam. But we need to use it as a coffer dam to hold the water back while we build the new one. If we didn't need to do that, yeah, it would be a great recycling project. As it is, we are hoping to not haul that off-site. We really don't want the air emissions. We don't want that impact. So the existing dam will be mostly removed, probably around 60 feet-ish down to the existing sediment level of the reservoir. And then we will probably spread some of that out in the 200 feet foot space between the old dam and the new dam, just for sediment control. And then we will have the aggregate quarry on site, and then the remainder will go in that quarry, and then it will be, covered over and reclaimed under the, under the terms of that operation. So that's what will happen to the old dam.
Thank you for explaining that. With the dam would be powered by solar, so there's no pumps required because of, but the dam requires some energy, and it looks like solar, but can you explain why the diesel generator is needed? Is that because solar is not always, it's not always, the sun's not always shining and you don't have, storage opportunities there, or what does that look like for the diesel generator?
Yeah, Commissioner, we are an off-grid facility. When we are built, there's a current single-phase power line that's owned by Poudre Valley REA that will be decommissioned post-construction. We will not be utilizing solar in the capacity that you're thinking of, although we will have some small-scale solar panels on our buildings and for instrumentation and things where it makes sense. But our primary power source is actually going to be hydro, a micro hydro unit. So we're able to get a dual use out of those protectable mitigation releases, and that it will produce the electricity we need for most of operation of the dam, even in the winter, even on that 3 CFS flow. So microhydro is the main component of our off-grid power source. We will supplement with heat pumps. We will supplement with some solar, with some battery backup, but not very large like lithium-ion battery backups, but more smaller, more focused to instrumentation. So that whole suite of things is going to allow us to be off-grid. Now we will have very large gates on the front of this dam, guard gates they're called, that need to be cycled annually for safety of dams requirements. We are not going to be able to generate enough power on site to operate those gates. That takes 3-phase power. So we will have 3-phase generators to run those guard gates, and we will have generator backup for safety, if something goes down. So we will be able to switch to generators. Diesel is probably what we're thinking now, but that decision has not been made. It could be powered by something else, and that propane or something, to be determined. But yes, so we will have generator backup, but for the vast majority of the time, we'll be a zero emissions off-grid facility. And I will note that the power will not be exported anywhere. It's all contained on site. We won't be able to generate enough power to economically export it. We couldn't get a transmission line out of there anyway. There's just a lot of logistics in the way, and there's permitting issues there as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Shannock McNally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You asked one of my questions. I kind of held on these questions because I didn't want to ask too many. But I did have the same question about the accumulation or cumulative effect of all these projects happening at once. And I'm glad you brought up the striping portion and bringing down the speed limit. So that's going to change a lot of habits for the residents around there, and there's a lot of commerce back and forth. So is this something that you have coordinated with other projects, or this is just something that that is associated with this project? Or has CDOT been talking? I know you're not, but is CDOT and others talking with everyone, saying, this is probably a good idea for this area, and then there's enforcement of that. So my question is CDOT helping? I don't know if they. That's not for your responsibility, but for CDOT, I'm just curious about that.
Yes, Commissioner, CDOT is aware of the regional impacts, and we have had many conversations with them, and they continue. We were actually going to do a more extensive permanent turn lane and some other work that they recommended against. So, but yeah, they're very, very aware of what's going to happen, and it will be. It's going to be a hassle for people that use that road a lot. It will be a hassle on 287, but it might, in a roundabout way, be safer, right? Because you're going to have to work through these projects. They're going to be highly controlled. They're going to be highly enforced. CDOT's working on the 287 safety plan, and they don't see any conflicts that I've heard of between all these activities happening at the same time and what they're trying to accomplish there by making 287 overall safer. We, at least myself personally, have not had any direct contact with the other projects about that specific issue. We'll absolutely have those conversations with CDOT about that holistic, idea of these projects and what those effects of 287 will be.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears here. Right now, as I understand it, I'm looking at a comment from one of the Landlord Association of Phantom Canyon, and they were talking, and my impression or my thought was, and maybe I'm wrong, this is not open for public access for the reservoir.
That's correct. We did not. This is a municipal water supply project. We did not permit it for recreation. That is not baked into our NEPA permitting cake, so to speak.
So I know there's still concerns. Will it ever have the potential of becoming open to public access? Because then there's, that increases concerns about wildfire risk and other things. And I'm curious if there is very slim potential or probably no plans for that.
Well, Commissioner, forever is a long time, but I can say with certainty that there's going to be no recreation component with this project on this timeline that's been proposed. And there are a lot of concerns with access. There's no public access in there except for what's controlled by CPW on the western end. And so there's a lot of search and rescue issues, and how do you get people in and out of there safely? Where can they actually get off of the surface of the reservoir onto the shoreline legally? There's a whole lot of issues that would need to be worked through. We are not working through those issues now. We're not having those conversations. We're going to get this project built as a municipal water supply project, and then perhaps those conversations will continue into the future. We have agreed with CPW to have those conversations post-construction, but it's not a part of this project.
I just thought I'd ask the question since that popped up as a concern of landlords. So, and then lastly, I appreciate the off-grid kind of condensed and decommissioning of the Poudre Valley REA line. So that line is only to come currently, the one that is visible is only to currently power that site and no other homeowners. It's just that one that's visible is to the site.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's exactly right. I think it's 1,500 linear feet. Maybe it's 2,500. I apologize for not knowing exactly, but we're at the end of the line. So, there's a drop and then it just comes to us and that whole stretch would be removed. The Land Association really likes that because sightline is a big thing on these conservation lands with those conservation easements. We'll remove that eyesore. So, yes, that's where no other homeowners, nobody else is impacted. It's just the stretch of line that feeds the current dam site.
And potentially a decrease in wildfire risk, too.
That's true.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Commissioner? Do you have other questions? Please go ahead.
Excuse me. Can we ask questions?
The public can't ask questions. There will be time for public comment, and if you can ask some questions in public comment, and we can try to get those answered for you, but they won't be answered on the spot. So, and we'll start public comment probably fairly soon as the commissioners are done asking the questions. Commissioner Kafales, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren. So I'm curious, could you say a little bit more about what you the projections that you use to determine water demand between now and 2065? I thought I saw a bar graph somewhere, but I might have just made it up in my head, that indicated the population of Fort Collins at 170, but I think we're already at 170. So I'm curious, what did you base the water demand needs, and how did you factor in water conservation and water efficiency?
Yes, Commissioner Kafales, we have a very robust water conservation program in Fort Collins. We're very proud of that. We were just discussing that earlier today, that we think that, our GPCD, per capita use per day was over 200 gallons a person in the 1990s, and we're down into the low 130s now with a target to go even lower. But when you factor that in as it goes to the no action alternative, and it's just not enough. We need more additional firm yield to meet the demands of our customers. And another thing that we don't have, going back to our limited storage that exists now, is in the EIS purpose and need, the target is 15% of our annual demand carryover monthly. study, and then in our internal water vulnerability study, we want to have a 20% carryover storage at the end of the year, and that all goes to that resiliency aspect. To just so you're not starting out from zero, so you hit these these bumps in the road, these droughts, and you can get through them. So that's how that was determined. I don't know the exact numbers now. We were around 30,000 feet firm yield a year that's needed, and then there was an additional 7,900 that was be needed to get us out to 2065. Without Halligan, we are projected to start getting pretty significant restrictions to our customers as soon as 2035 with supply and availability. One thing I will note about Halligan, all this water is sourced from this side of the divide. It's not a trans mountain or trans basin. There's no impacts to the western slope. There's no impacts to the Colorado River compact. So that makes it an even more valuable water resource because of the potential issues that are going to happen with those trans mountain diversions, trans basin diversions.
Madam Chair, just two more, and then I'll be done. Thank you. Thank you, sir. So regarding cumulative effects and climate considerations, can you speak a little bit more about that? And in particular, since the proposed increase in the water storage capacity of the Halligan Reservoir, the surface area would be increased from, is it 253 acres to 391 acres. How much consideration was given to the evaporation and how we might lose some of that water capacity from evaporation?
Commissioner, that's one of the great things about this location is that it is a very narrow, deep valley. So the water is deep. We have about a 65-foot-ish water depth now. We'll add 25 feet on top of that. So you don't, if you're building a reservoir that evaps a lot, tends to be shallow with a whole lot of surface area. And we're the opposite. We're deep with comparatively minimal surface area. So we don't think we'll evap very long or very much. There always is some. This reservoir doesn't stratify very much. It doesn't go hypoxic at the bottom of the water column very often. It can happen, but in the residence time of this reservoir is very short from the amount of water that flows through it, and it turns over very early in the season. And some of that is the way it's designed, the way the prevailing winds flow from the west to the east. It just moves that water and churns it in that reservoir, and it mixes it really nice and well and keeps it cool and minimizes, the evap. And just a cooler climate. We're up at 6,700 feet elevation. I wouldn't call that a super high elevation reservoir, but it's still, it's pretty chilly up there. We're not anticipating massive losses to evap. One thing to note, we are expanding to 8,200 acre feet, which was allowed by our, the Army Corps of Engineers, and our firm yield that we need is 7,900 acre feet. So we do have a little bit of cushion there.
Last question. I'm sure you're aware that we must base our decisions on the 22 basic review criteria in Article 10, as well as Article 4, the development standards, and then some supplementary review criteria. For the record, how do you believe that review criterion E, that speaks to the various environmental categories and talks about a mitigation hierarchy, how do you feel that this project complies with that particular review criterion?
Yeah, so number one on that list, I believe, Commissioner, is air quality. And we've talked about that, right? We're going to have multiple projects going on at the same time. But we will meet our APEN permit standards, administered by CDPHE. So it doesn't matter necessarily that there are multiple projects going on at once. We still can't be out of compliance in our permit. So we're going to use best management practices, of course. That's a term that's thrown around, the Tier 4 latest emission standards on our equipment. And I believe we're going to start paying real close attention to that air quality permit sooner rather than later. We are just outside of the non-attainment area for ozone, but still we realize there's a lot of other projects in the area. So a lot of times those air quality permits would be handled potentially by the contractor, but I think we're going to get in front of that because I know we've heard that loud and clear through this process, that maintaining high quality air standards for this project is very important, and so we will certainly strive to do that. I don't know if I have all of them, 8 of them memorized.
And I'm not suggesting you need to go through all 8 of them, but I mean, the general concept is to avoid impacts to significant natural resource values,
That's right.
minimize impacts and mitigate impacts,
Yes.
and maybe a statement about how you feel that
Yeah,
this project is adhering to that.
certainly, Commissioner. So the majority of those 8 ones, I think, a lot of them are related to water. And we made the statement earlier, and we stand by. We feel that we are fully mitigated on this project, and that we will actually be introducing a net benefit to the flow regime of the North Fork of the Poudre, a net benefit in temperature all the way through the stretch. We are fully mitigated our water quality to legal water quality standards before it even goes through the outlets of our reservoir. Our operation plans, our mitigation plans, there's nothing I think we feel like we have to apologize for or work around and say, sorry, that's the cost of doing business. We really feel that we are going to have a situation when we're operational better than exists today on the water quality side. And so, I don't think you're always able to say that. So we're very, very, proud to be able to say that. There's the list going through. Groundwater is not an issue. 0 impacts on that. The wetlands, we talked about the wetlands bank, the reestablishment of the riparian areas along the North Fork. I mean, the aquatic habitat, terrestrial habitat improvements on that we feel are just be absolutely tremendous. Soils and geologic conditions, that'll be, we'll have an engineered plans in place on that. We're not learning any geological hazard area, no, major concerns there. Visual quality, we are very closely aligned with the Land Association of Phantom Canyon Ranches, and I've already mentioned, line of sight issues are a real concern. And so when we cite things and, a SCADA tower or a solar panel, we are very aware to try to keep those line of sight issues at a minimum. And we have, done 3D modeling of the area and to make sure that those line of sight issues are as minimized as possible.
Thank you.
So I guess, Commissioner, the bottom line is I think we hit all the marks on those 8, and we're feeling really good about this project.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think it would be good to go to public comment now. We can always ask further questions, so we'll ask you to take your seat, and we'll move to public comment, and we reserve the right to bring you back up. But let's sounds like people in the audience would like to speak on this item, and so we will now open public comment. Do we have folks signed up for public comment, or should we just ask people in the
We
audience?
do. We have one signed up,
Okay.
and that is Zach Thode.
Okay.
And
Well, go ahead.
Madam Chair, would you like to institute a time limit on public comment?
Yeah, please, 3 minutes.
Thank you.
And then, so we'll have Zach come up first because he is in the audience and has signed up. And then we'll open it up to the audience for anyone who else wants to speak. And then we'll open it up to folks online as well. So welcome, Zach. We'll have you introduce yourself and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Zach Thoe with Livermore, Colorado, lifelong resident, and grew up 2 miles south of Halligan Reservoir. And now I ranch on the east side of Halligan Reservoir towards 287, and I'm glad to know that all it takes is asking CDOT to lower the speed limit to 45 miles an hour, and they're willing to do it. So maybe we can get them to lower it in a couple other spots. I'm here fully in support of the Halligan project. It's a good project. I think there's some things we've learned along the way that could be better, some things that could be worse. One thing that us as farmers are thankful for is the city of Fort Collins is now going to take all the evaporation risk for the reservoir. So the farmers get the bottom half and they get the top. So we don't have to pay the evaporation anymore. The other thing that I think this project is going to enable, after conversations with City of Fort Collins staff, is to have a broad conversation about ag districts and how we can use their water portfolio that they rent out to help benefit their project, help benefit in-stream flows in the North Fork of the Poudre, which is dry longer and further than they like to even tell you, not because of anything that they've done, but just because it's a dry area. But I think this provides an opportunity to talk about how ag districts can create a viable ag economy in a local area like Livermore, and how their water portfolio could help enhance that at the same time as enhancing their environmental mitigation program. So I'm looking forward to the conversation to extend with the City of Fort Collins staff. in regards to that. I do second the concerns about recreation. I hope that the city of Fort Collins will not allow public recreation. That area is very hard to manage and very hard to keep trespassing out. And many of the landowners up there are very concerned about that. One last thing I'll bring up is, and I think we missed another opportunity as a community and maybe even as a county to find how a project can lift up a community after the project's over. And right now, and I think the ship's already sailed here, and I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining an opportunity we missed. County Road 80C is a very tough road to maintain for the county staff. It costs the county a lot of money to keep it in marginal condition, not even good condition, and they try very hard. No shade on the county staff, but the city is going to pay a lot of money to improve the east side access. That will then just be a big highway that nobody drives on. And I think had we looked at this broader, they could have spent that amount of money on the Cherokee Park Road. We would have had a tougher impact during construction, but when it was finished, we would have had a better road for you guys to maintain. And that same thing kind of happened with the Thornton project too. This BOCC wasn't involved with that, but I think we missed that on the first time on the Thornton project. But anyway, I'm here to support the project, and thanks to city staff. Thank you to the commissioners.
Thank you, Zach. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this? Sir, did you want to speak and see if you...
I have questions.
Well, I think coming up for a few minutes and asking some of those questions, and maybe we can get some answers for you when we ask questions of the City of Fort Collins staff. So that's the only way we're going to be able to do that for you. So if you want to kind of come up and pose some of those questions, we'd be happy to hear those.
Several of the questions are for Darren.
Okay, yeah. But please come up. We'll give you 3 minutes. We'll try to keep track of those questions. We'll ask city staff to kind of keep track of those questions as well. And if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Bruce Wally. I live on Phantom Canyon Ranches.
Okay.
One of the questions for Darren is that do you plan to expand?
Wait, can you, I'm sorry, we'll ask you to speak into the, we'll just pause for 1 second, so we'll stop the timer. We'll ask you to speak into the microphone and speak to the commissioners.
Okay.
And I know that they're listening and we're listening too, and we're all writing down, so we'll try to get some of those questions answered for you.
Okay. First question is, do you plan to expand the width of Meadow Creek Road?
Okay. Next question.
Next question, do you plan to dredge the sediment out of Halligan Reservoir? And if you do remove it, where are you going to put it? Because it's been a big sediment trap for years. On the presentation, Ms. Ashberger gave, I was wondering if that, like your 52 points, is there a website that expands on that data? And recreation is a concern. It appears that you're still saying you're not going to do that, but it sounds like you're only talking as far as 2030. I have a question about Project 1041. Is that a county project? Is that an Army Corps of the Engineers project? And there was supposed to be a survey of Native Americans having a concern on the area. I didn't hear that addressed at all today. Was a report ever finished on that? And just as a suggestion, you gave a presentation at the beginning, a PowerPoint presentation. You need to increase the size of the font because the people all the way in the back there, I'm sure, cannot read it. That's all I've got.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming up. We will make sure we get some of those questions answered because I think those are important questions to get answered. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to give public comment? It's all staff from the city or staff from the county. How about anyone online? Is there anyone online who'd like to give public comment?
If there are any members of the public online who would like to make public comment, please use the raise hand function. There are no hands.
There are no hands. Okay, last opportunity for public comment. All right, seeing no hands raised, we'll close public comment. So we will give the applicant 5 minutes to rebut or respond to any of those questions, and maybe maybe a little more time because we'd probably like to hear that some of those questions answered that were posed recently. So if someone would come up, speak to maybe some of what you've heard from the couple of residents that spoke today. Thank you, Darren.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I work through the list, I will have our water rights attorney, Eric Padiani, come up to address the recreation question. But I will start about talking about Meadow Creek Road and expanding the width. We are going to give that road a very, very light touch just to build the test quarry and the one half of the river crossing road that we need to put in place. That is at the request of the Phantom Canyon Ranches, the Landowners Association, and we are working with county staff to make sure that we meet all their expectations and requirements too. We will have, I believe, 2 wide spots. The design on that is supposed to be ready by this Friday. It will be shared with the LEPCR board at a meeting we have with them, Thursday morning, not Friday morning. And we're anticipating those to come in the next couple of days. We'll have 2 spots. It's one-way traffic in and out. So there will be no staging area. There will be no real improvements at the turn off of ADC onto Meadow Creek Road. The LEPCR has requested a new gate, and we will move the gate back a little bit in order to get a semi-truck safely off the road. The turn, it will use traffic control. It will be permitted through the county in the times that we're mobilizing equipment in and out for that project. Right a couple hundred feet off of the road, there's a puffy tree, they call it, and we have agreed not to touch that tree. So we have very detailed plans to protect this tree. We're going to try not to do cut and fill. We're going to try not to disturb any more rock than we have to. There are Preble's meadow jumping mice that have been found in the Meadow Creek itself drainage. We're no fill in there. We're going to keep things as narrow, as tight as we possibly can. So it's one-way traffic in, a turnaround on city property, one-way traffic out. There are, I believe, 2 corners that will have to be widened out. There might be 3, but there's at least 2 in order just to do that turning radius of a truck. We've also downsized the size of the truck and trailer that we're going to use for that project. So it's not going to be widened to a 2-lane road. It's going to be, for the most part, the vast majority of that access is going to be the width that it is now, and not substantially widened, no. I'll move on to 2, which is dredging the sediment out of the reservoir. We wish that sediment was out of that reservoir, but we're going to take the opposite tact, and we are not going to disturb it at all. So there is currently 10 feet of sediment that's built up against the base of the existing dam. That's like 8 or 9 feet above the low-level outlet works, and that's what led to like unplanned sediment releases that occurred out there in the 90s, where you get that sediment starts to flow out and it jams the gates. That sediment, we want to leave it there and leave it alone. And so when I mentioned earlier the old dam removal, we are going to remove it down to the existing sediment level, and that's where we're going to stop. And so it's going to essentially be a cutoff wall to hold that existing sediment in place. And then through our sediment management operational plan, the 200 feet between the old dam and the new dam, we will have the velocities and the flushing through there to move sediment through to keep that clear and keep that sediment from building up against the outlet works of our new structure, and we think it'll work very well. In states like California, a sediment cutoff like that is like a mandatory thing. Here, we just fortuitously just happen to have one functionally in place already. So we are hoping to minimize sedimentation into the reservoir as far as taking up our storage. And, you know, the lost storage that's there currently from the sediment that's in there, we offset by building a taller dam and a little 200 feet downstream. So another benefit to MPIC is they're getting their dead storage back that has infilled from sediment, not only, you know, the evaporation issue. So it's another side benefit to them. So I think that's it. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a sediment TMDL for a big release like that, which is more of an accident than a common occurrence. But it's also a sediment-starved reach just because of the way the flow regime works. And so we are going to get some sediment at the right times back through that system for aquatic life and habitat. I think the 1041 is a county project. I might pass that one to the county planners. But I can go to number 5, the cultural resources question. And absolutely, we do cultural resources evaluations through SHPO, Class 3 cultural resource evaluation of not only our project site, but areas largely outside of our project site. We have those reports have been completed. They've been compiled. I believe they've been shared with the county. Now, as an archaeologist, they can receive those. That information is deemed very sensitive now due to vandalism and things like that. So it's hard to see those reports. Most of us on staff haven't even seen them because they're only for qualified people are allowed to see those reports. But they are done. We know generally the gist of what we've got to work with. There was nothing of historical significance other than the construction sites of the old dam, like the old man camp and the old outhouse and the old quarry site, have been documented as areas of interest historically. They're all associated with the construction of the previous dam, but there was no Paleo-Indian sites or anything like that found in the area that we would impact. There were some found in the general area, but they're outside of anything that'll be impacted or inundated by our project. But since they were found, and I think what's kind of neat is that the Northern Cheyenne Tribe is going to send representatives out to go out with the archaeologist on our project and look at these paleo sites and document those. So that's great. And what's also great is none of those sites are in any kind of danger for any kind of impacts from our project.
Thank you. There was some vagueness in the report, and that's because of the sensitivity around maybe treasure seekers or something like that, kind of exploiting some of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, Madam Chair, and that is a frustration I know. But on the cultural resources side, there is vagueness in there, and that's on purpose. It's difficult for us it's hard for us to get that information back and forth into the project and out of the project. We have done what's called a hair analysis, which is aerial photography. So we've documented everything that exists there today. So that will be always there and available so we can see the site, pre-construction. So that has been completed.
And I'm glad there's been contact with the tribes to make sure that gets anything that's found that gets returned to the rightful owners. I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to let my colleagues talk for just a second, but I am going to jump in. One of the other questions that Mr. Wall was asking about was the recreation, and I think we had answered that you have no intention, but he had mentioned a date of 2030, and I don't know if that, I don't think, were you considering recreation after 2030, or you really weren't considering it at all?
Madam Chair, I know we're over our 5 minutes, but if we could have a few more.
Okay, we're calling this Q&A at this point again. We saw the clock go off, so this is. Yeah. I think it was important to get that question answered, and because the date of 2030 came up, I hadn't seen that date, but we want to make sure that the folks that are in the audience and that are listening online, that have a full understanding that there is no intention, is my understanding, of having recreation even beyond 2030.
Yes, Madam Chair. I will let Eric Padiandi answer that question.
Hello. My name is Eric Payandi. I'm with the City Attorney's Office for Fort Collins. It looks like I've been given the hot potato of recreation. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context because there's been a lot of confusion over the years, not just in this hearing, about recreation. So, as we all know, Halligan Reservoir is located really on a patchwork of lands. There's lands that are inundated. There's a BLM parcel. There's some privately owned lands. There's lands owned by the state of Colorado through Colorado Parks and Wildlife. There's lands that now the city owns, some landowners associations. It's really quite a patchwork. There's also easements out there. It's really interesting, and as I like to tell my clients, when your lawyer says something's interesting, it's going to be challenging and confusing. So currently, there are some lands that can be accessed by the public at times, particularly the CPW lands. They can be accessed off of Cherokee Park Road through their state wildlife area. And for the most part, people can kind of go down to the high water line of the existing reservoir. The city of Fort Collins, now that we own Halligan Reservoir, which we purchased from the North Couta Irrigation Company, we own the property rights to who gets to use the surface of the reservoir. In Colorado, that's a separate property right. Just because you own land next to a body of water doesn't necessarily mean you get to use the surface of the reservoir. So those rights are controlled by Fort Collins. When Fort Collins bought Halligan Reservoir back in 2004, we inherited a lease that North Poudre used to lease the surface rights to the Landowners Association for Phantom Canyon Ranches. And historically, we've kept that situation going. We've continued to lease the use of the surface to the Landowners Association, which they've continued to do. That lease runs through construction of the reservoir, and after that, we have the right to terminate the lease or to let it run for the rest of its term, which I think is another 5-10 years after that. So that's a private lease to a private entity. All the while, in this great saga of the permitting for this project, there have been lots of conversations about recreation on the reservoir and public recreation in particular. We've heard loud and clear from a lot of residents in the area that they are not interested in public recreation. They have a lot of concerns. And at times we've heard other agencies, particularly state agencies, kind of prodding and suggesting, well, can we look at that? Can we look at public recreation, because surface water recreation is something that's in short supply and something a lot of people like. In the 2018-2019 time period, the City of Fort Collins staff did an analysis with CPW staff to look at all the factors about whether this would be a good area to open for public recreation. Things like public safety, environmental impacts, the land ownership issues and all that. And they made the decision that the recommendation that, well, this isn't easy, if nothing else. There's a lot of concerns, a lot of things to work through. All the while, our project, albeit at a glacial pace, has been working its way through the permitting process, and we had to make a decision. Do we want to try to figure out recreation, or do we want to try to get this reservoir built for our water supply? So with that, the City of Fort Collins made the decision, we're going to put recreation to the side. It's not something that does a lot for us or our community. That's what our analysis showed. We hear the concerns from local residents. We're just basically going to set that, not have this be part of our project, and deal with it later if that's what people want. So currently, the main group that has been pushing to have this conversation about public recreation has been Colorado Parks and Wildlife. As part of our Fish and Wildlife Mitigation and Enhancement Plan, we agreed that separate from the Halligan project, we would be willing to have that conversation with them about public recreation after we get our project done, basically. And we are working on an agreement with them that has a long list of things that would need to be discussed and figured out. Things like access, public safety, fire safety, the concerns of local landowners, where are you going to get in and out of the reservoir, particularly in high wind situations, all those things. And ultimately, really to have the reservoir be open for public recreation, the Fort Collins City Council would need to grant someone a property right to use the surface of the reservoir. So currently there are no plans for us to do this. And while we're willing to have those conversations, I think there's definite appreciation from all of us here at the City of Fort Collins that this is not an easy thing, and there's a reason it hasn't been figured out yet, and we're hearing the concerns of local residents loud and clear. And I know that was a lot of information, but I thought I would just give it all to you at once.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions for Eric while he's up here? Commissioner Cavallis?
Just very quickly, thank you, Eric. I would presume that if there are any subsequent conversations after the proposed project may be completed, that there would be a stakeholder process. There would be input from the residents that would help inform any future decisions. And if the residents are very much opposed to this, that would be an important factor.
Definitely. And in the laundry list of issues to be addressed, having stakeholder meetings and figuring out that would probably be in addition to whatever legally mandated process there is to bring an item before it's the Fort Collins City Council to grant that right. And, I can also say that in general, Fort Collins understands or has an understanding of the local community, and we are building relationships, and that's not something we don't want to burn those relationships in the long term.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that clarification. That was really helpful. I will just say, a 1041 project that is a county. It's a county process that we have regulations that we look at when we are evaluating these big projects that have a big effect on our community and our residents. So, and then one of the things that was mentioned was the 52 conditions that we created. The deck of cards that we created for the 52 conditions probably can be found online, I would imagine. And we can, if you want to contact one of us, we can make sure that you get a copy of that.
Yeah, and actually,
Is there a Halligan Reservoir website that might get that information?
We'll ask.
so
Jenny.
the conditions of approval are actually part of the packet, but if you step outside, there's a woman named Shalana Lasite who can get you that web address, and she'd be happy to give it to you on your way out.
So I think we got a lot of those questions answered. So I'm going to bring it back to the board, see if there's any further questions that we have for staff, for city staff, for county staff.
Madam Chair,
Go
I just
ahead.
wanted to add on to what you had said to the gentleman's question. This is a City of Fort Collins and their project to increase and bring resiliency and secure their water supply. The state of Colorado, that's why it's called 1041. That was the number of the legislation that was passed. That's why it's called a 1041 process. That was the bill legislative number, and that allowed counties and other governmental agencies, as it said in the beginning of the presentation, to be able to mitigate, have this process to have some kind of legal way to mitigate impacts of these major state interest projects. And so it's our only way to help make sure the impacts to neighbors and the community are minimal or mitigated. And so we robustly increased these back when we first came on the board in 2021. And there's certain 22 criteria, as they said in the beginning, and then also the 52 points or conditions of approval are on top of those 22 criteria. So they're above and beyond more restrictions or conditions of approval to even further some of our concerns with the project. So I just wanted to kind of, if you don't mind, I just wanted to kind of address that to understand this is not our project. This is our process to work with the city to mitigate the impacts for our county and our residents. So just wanted to state that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that was a good explanation of what we're doing here tonight. So any further questions? Commissioners, do you have any further questions for staff or for the applicant?
I think so.
Okay. I wanted to ask one question, and Leah might be able to help, and then others might be able to help. Some of the question was around noise, and I appreciated the letter we got from the homeowners that are around the Landowners Association for Phantom Canyon Ranches. And they were very concerned with, they were supportive of the application, and their concerns were more about people using the reservoir. But I mean, as a big project like this goes underway, noise mitigation is really important. And do you feel like we've captured in the 52 conditions a way to help residents with that? What might be kind of a noisy process as there some dismantling and creating, excavating and all the kind of work that's going to be done? It sounded like that there were some times that they were definitely going to exceed some of our county standards, or maybe not. I don't know. Can you speak to that?
Sure. A noise study was completed as part of the EIS that we reviewed. And one thing we have to remember is that during construction, there are louder noise thresholds because it's considered temporary. So as part of that noise modeling study that they completed, all construction noise all construction activities and everything would be below the 75 decibels for evening or 80 decibels during the day. There might be a chance for audible noise. It's just not going to exceed the threshold. And they did evaluate over thousands of feet. And we will, for the most part, they'll be maintaining residential levels, which are 55 to 60, or I'm sorry, 50 to 55 decibels. And in some instances, it might go up to 60, but it's not exceeding our construction thresholds per the modeling.
Okay, so there's additional thresholds that are, like, there's a higher threshold for during a small window when construction is actually happening.
Of course, yep. And I know we had included some conditions. So we wanted, let's see, I'm just going back to my notes too. So we asked if they're going to do anything exceptional, any outside activity, beyond the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to work with us as a county. And that could be anything relating to roads with engineering, any additional blasting requirements, if there are any. We might have some with the quarry tests coming up. There might be one of the things on the dam, it may be one of the options was using dynamite, but I think they looked at some of the other options being a little better. So when I was answering your question, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I wasn't aware of the quarry potential. But we have an outreach plan. They are supposed to notify of additional activities that could produce, more noise than other events on site. So we've conditioned in some of those controls to help. And we're asking for more information and more detailed information as part of the technical review so we can better evaluate it. Because right now it's just too conceptual.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I think I read that there's going to be signage around any of the construction work that where residents can get in touch with the people doing the project in case there's any concerns that come across. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's part of that outreach plan that we're asking for, like just to update the community members of what's going on, have your number and contact information if they have questions or concerns.
Right.
Because it's better if they can address it first before we come in with regulations and penalties.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes there's noises that can sound disturbing and scary, and so
Sure.
want people to be able to make sure that they have the opportunity to ask the questions that they need to ask.
We agree. Yes.
Any other Commissioner Shattuck McNally?
So I did ask earlier my question about the night sky new regulations and my concerns about that. And I know I read in the packet, I was just looking for that. It's a shorter time period, like 2 to 3 months, where it'll be 24/7. And since I am experiencing years of 24/7 night sky disturbance, but I know I hear from a lot of folks that it gets old. But is that something that I could ask the applicant, or something you could do in the technical review to see if they would be considering if those 2 to 3 months happen during the Super Bowl of bird migration at night? I don't know what else that's what they call it online, but I don't know what the technical term is. Maybe Scott knows it. Is that something they might consider, at least that the 1 or 2 nights where it's critical to maybe dim the lights, because that is kind of a migratory bird area? I'm just curious. Should I ask them, or is that something you could do in the technical review?
So that is absolutely something that we will take a look at in the technical review. It wasn't reviewed against the new code, as I mentioned earlier, because it wasn't in effect when we received this application. But we can look at that as 24-hour operations as part of that. I would also say that the Board of County Commissioners could impose a condition limiting the use of lighting during those specific migratory times. And I'll see if Scott Benton wants to add anything to that.
There's also some other standard practices like down shielding and looking at the intensity of lighting, measures like that can help as well. So.
Yeah, but I know it's just that 1 or 2 nights where it'd be great if everyone, because they ask us all to turn off our lights across the country. So I don't know, is that something I should ask? If it's considered, I would be considered if my colleagues would be open to that, to make that a condition of approval if the applicants aren't too adverse to that. If that 2 to 3 months falls in that, I think it's fall, right? It's the beginning of fall.
2 main migrations.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good for both.
Okay. Then I would hope my colleagues might consider that as a condition for make it 53.
I would like further clarification. I thought you just said that those issues would be addressed in the current conditions of approval.
We can review, and we will review and technical review. Maybe the request is for specific language in the condition of approval for technical review?
So I haven't. I can pull up the new code right now and take a look. I'm not sure if the bird migration is covered completely in that new
It's
code
not.
language, and that's my concern, is that we can best address that through a condition of approval.
I don't think it's adequately addressed in that because, it's one of those areas that but I would, if possible, I'd like to add that as a condition of approval for the two areas of that time for the construction, where it's 24/7. It's just those, I don't think it's that big of a time frame. It's not like the other one that's been a longer frame, so.
And just to be clear, the 24/7 operations are only anticipated for a certain amount of time. It's not for the entire duration of the construction.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not sure if we know exactly if that's during those two bird migrations, but in case it does fall on those bird migration super periods, that they would consider maybe at the peak of it to limit nighttime sky lighting up at in those critical periods.
Yeah, I think we can do that, right? We can add that as a condition. It seems like
I
a
would like to
reasonable
hear the
condition.
wording of the condition.
If you'll give me just a minute, we proposed and you adopted a similar condition on the Thornton pipeline hearing. Let
Yep.
me just pull up that language so we can be consistent.
I was just going to suggest that, since the commissioner needs specific language, so be consistent.
Any other questions while we're waiting for that answer?
One other question came up from another public comment that I don't know if we had addressed, was I believe it's the road 80C. Is it 80C that? So it's not in great condition now, and I know they said there was a light touch. Or not really going to be using that. Is that will there be? Can you remind me? There's going to be any kind of improvements or adjustments to that road at all during the construction phase, since there will be some traffic on it?
Stephen Rothwell, Larimer County Engineering. We did discuss this. I say we, County Engineering, County Road and Bridge. We got together, took a look at the applicant's traffic impact report, and actually had the applicant make some revisions to show and account for the potential of traffic if there is sufficient aggregate on site or if they were going to have to haul it in from an off-site source. In both cases, the amount of actual heavy truck traffic that would hit County Road 80C is pretty minimal. It's hard to define minimal when there's other operations out there that could far exceed the amount of trucks that, say, the Halligan construction operation would generate. But at the end of the day, there are no planned improvements to ADC itself other than the access points for their private road improvements farther to the west. But we did add a fairly general condition with the intent that if our road and bridge, the director, assistant director find that their maintenance activities are greatly increased out there, if they're having to service it out there 3-4 times a year, that we be able or have the mechanism to go back to the applicant and charge them for those increased activities.
Thank you for that answer, and that I didn't know that you're making my brain go. I knew exactly which condition you were talking about when you mentioned that, so I appreciate you making that connection. Thank you. That answers my question.
All right, on the screen should be coming up condition 81 that was used in the approval of the Thornton Pipeline project. And it recommends an exterior lighting management plan be provided as part of technical review that outlines specific requirements and best practices related to lighting operations during construction with the goal of minimalizing light pollution, disturbances to nearby residents, disturbance to migratory birds, and other wildlife. Lighting outside standard operating hours should be avoided and is subject to review and approval by Larimer County staff on a case-by-case basis. Lighting should be avoided during times of peak spring and fall migration as determined and agreed to by the applicant on an annual basis in consultation with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the local Audubon Society. Does that get at what you're... And we can certainly update that condition to apply to the city of Fort Collins.
And if I might, Madam Chair, I think in the application, correct me if I'm wrong, but their operation hours, and unless it was the 2 to 3 months of 24/7, was 7 to 6 p.m.
I believe that is correct.
So should we change that and that too? So, okay. No, I think this is sufficient. And of course, we have to change it for the applicant's name. But thank you. Thank you, Jenny. I'm impressed you pulled that up. Maybe it took a little bit, but I'm impressed you pulled that up that quickly.
And just to actually point out one more condition to make sure everyone's aware, condition 25, which will become condition 24, requires that if recreation were to be added to this project, that it would be reviewed as an amendment to this 1041 permit.
Thank you. All right, any other questions before we move into deliberation? All right, Commissioner Kafalis, I'll let you start.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks to the applicants, City of Fort Collins folks. Certainly very grateful for the residents that are here in person and who have been engaged in this process. It's indeed been a long journey. Water projects take an awful long time. So I'm glad that there has been good community engagement. I will support this City of Fort Collins Halligan Water Supply Project 1041 application, basically because, well, I think folks have been very thorough. They've been proactive about engaging with the residents up there to minimize any impacts to property owners and all of that. And of course, ultimately, we make our decisions based on the 22 review criteria that are in Article 10. I think it's 10.9.1. And then the additional review criteria, 7 of them that pertain to water storage projects. And then, of course, Article 4, the development standards. So I believe that with the conditions of approval, as discussed this evening, the thoroughness of this application, the justification for the purpose and need, all of those reasons inform my decision to vote in favor of this application with the now 53 conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kafalis. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank City for Collins and Itesco and all the partners for this long but very comprehensive and thorough application. I do think your commitment to protect the environment and ecological sensitivities in the area, and it's not just a one and done. I can see the long-term commitment to the river health of restoring that river flow, which will what comes downstream has got literally downstream impacts all along, and kind of maybe addressing 100 and some odd year of harm in my mind of that dry riverbed and addressing that. And I'm anxious to see how that all comes to fruition. I do see the need and understand unique conditions. And I think it's kind of a unique and special project to have a partnership between a current water owner and operator, and then add on top of it, and to not build a whole nother site, but actually use its current site, which actually has some great conditions for keeping the water temperature and the water health at a good level, which I think is very unique. And I thought that was a great point to make about the wind and the churning and keeping the water temperature and the health of the river. And then the addition of the oxygenation and things to help with downstream flows. I know Criterion E has conditions, and I think like the visual quality, taking away the electrical lines and improving that line of sight, and having off-grid power and all those adjustments, and there's just a lot of things that have been addressed in this. And that's, of course, why it's over 11,000 pages. I think I could go on and on about the impacts, and I do appreciate dealing with the cheatgrass and trying to protect and take care of the current bighorn sheep population. And though it's small, it's still kind of historic important, and I appreciate the extra above measures to take care of that. And hopefully, maybe this will help them thrive and rebound a little bit. So I'm hopeful, and I appreciate you all being thoughtful about that. Also, I do think using the current dam and breaking it down and using that as a sediment kind of, I don't know, sediment dam, I guess. I think that's really, really innovative and a very unique position. And I appreciate your seem to be fine with the conditions of approval and adding this night sky one. Who knows if the timing will light up, but I think anything we can do to minimize those impacts, it's really important. So with that saying, I do think the applicants have addressed all the criteria, and I've actually gone above and beyond on some of these criteria. And I do appreciate the outreach to the neighbors, the continued long-term outreach to the neighbors and to other partners to work through complex issues, because it is a kind of a complex location. And so with that, I do believe this application meets all those criteria. And I do think it is a very well-written mitigation plan there, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it. So with that, I will be supporting this application.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll also be supporting the application. I appreciate the thoroughness of the application. Didn't always appreciate having to go through 11,000 pages and try to retain all the information in those pages. But I understand that, part of that obviously was requirements that and EIS, statements from the Army Corps of Engineers, and I think that going through that EIS procedure and getting public input is really, is a good way to make this a really sound application. And I do appreciate the extra mitigation that the city is willing to do to make sure that this project is environmentally responsible. So I do like the stream and river health mitigation that's being done. The fact that there's consideration around the wetlands and the Preval jumping mouse, and it seems sound, and I appreciate some of the explanation around the other the other proposals for the alternative ways to capture this water. So right, there's this is one option. There was the option of no action. There was the option of the no, I'm losing my train of thought, but there were several options that were relayed, and none of those seemed really viable for the city to be able to sort of capture the water that they're not able to do at this point. And so, but it was really thorough to really understand why those other proposals weren't considered or weren't followed through with. So yeah, I think this is a good application. I look forward to, seeing the project be completed. I guess I would encourage the city, and I think you will, is to stay in touch with the neighbors, because I think that piece is really important as we move forward. Reassuring them and making them understand, kind of what's happening at what times, and making sure that they have somebody to respond to their questions and their concerns if those come up. And I assume the city will probably have some sort of web page that people can follow the progress of the project as it moves along. And I guess I would say, we heard from Zach Tho tonight, and really, how do we work with our friends in agriculture and make sure that all these water projects really are, that we're talking to one another, because I think that there's a lot of concerns in the community about how do we do this better. There's been some bad actors and some bad examples of how when we don't work with agriculture, what that looks like, for our land, what it looks like for agricultural preservation. And so I think that those are conversations that should continue to be had. I think we need to have them as a county as well. But I appreciate that you would consider that, keeping those conversations open, because we need to. There's a limited supply of water, and we need to work on these issues together. And our community wants us to preserve agriculture and to make sure we're doing a good job. And so, I think that the application definitely shows of how we can balance environmental protections alongside of really making sure that we have water storage and water preservation for these drought times and for the anticipated growth in Fort Collins. So, I just, these are big, hard conversations, and I appreciate the city and Ag being involved in those conversations. So I will be supporting this, and Commissioner, I do support the additional condition that you proposed. And so I will ask Commissioner Shattuck McNally to make a motion on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the application for a 1041 permit for the Halligan Water Supply Project, file number 24-CONE 3697, subject to the conditions of approval recommended by the staff in the updated staff report, with the removal of a duplicative condition 15 and the additional condition regarding lighting during peak bird migration that's discussed in the hearing, for a total of 53 conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's a motion on the table. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 3-0. That is the only item on our agenda this evening. So at 8:36, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.